Hello, this is a infinite ammo crossbow Lich using the Last Lament crossbow that was added in the most recent patch. I'm currently in a T15 map. It's not particularly crazy rolled, it's just extra monster packs and a few additional packs of Ramble monsters. Some shrine investment, some essence investment on the tree, nothing super crazy. So I'll quickly just run through this. I'll do this breach, and then kind of talk about the build a little bit before going in depth. So basically the idea is that the Last Lament has a line on it that makes it so you sacrifice 300 life instead of firing the last bolt loaded into the crossbow. We use Lich for one of the Ascendancy nodes gives your life cannot change if you have energy shield, basically. So we can completely bypass the sacrifice life mod on the crossbow and basically just use that Ascendancy node from Lich for infinite ammo. I am using Siege Cascade as a skill. There's probably better skills, but this just seemed cool. There are definitely some downsides to Siege Cascade. There is a bit of a delay before your damage, and Siege Cascade targets enemies where they're standing when the target was acquired. So if the enemy moves, then it has a pretty good chance of missing, which is pretty annoying. So I've got a little bit of projectile speed using the acceleration support gem, which helps a little bit. So we'll do this boss here. And I can show you how bad the single target is. I'm using Ripwire Ballista as well for pinning. Does not pin very well against bosses. The Siege Cascade gets a 200% more damage multiplier against immobilized enemies. So because that's bad, we can switch to Requiem. However, as you just saw there's a bug where if you get hit, or rather if you get stunned, or for some reason if you use your life flask, the skill will be completely cancelled. Which is pretty annoying. Requiem is kind of like your main single target in this. As you can see, Siege Cascade itself is not very good for single target. I wouldn't say this build is tanky. It has some pretty decent defensive layers, but the main thing it lacks with its current setup is sustain. All of the sustain for the build comes from your life flask, using Eternal Youth to convert it into to make it recover your energy shield instead of your life. Once this bug gets fixed for Requiem, it'll definitely be a lot better. The single target is far better in my skill than it is on Siege Cascade itself. Yeah, so have a quick run through of the gear and stuff like that into the tree. So it revolves around the Last Lament. The Last Lament is a crossbow that was added in the last patch. It has some decent fizz damage, some okay attack speed. It has a big reload speed downside, but with this setup, it's completely negated. It doesn't matter. It has some life leech, which you can make use of if you use Essential Sanguis with a fizz skill, which I'll talk more about in a sec. 17% chance to load a bolt into all crossbow skills on kill. I haven't really bothered like factoring this into the build at all. And then the line, sacrifice 300 life to not consume the last bolt when firing. This is the main reason why I chose Lich for this. Lich has the node Eternal Life. Your life cannot change while you have Energy Shield. So that means that when you would sacrifice 300 life, your life cannot change, so nothing is sacrificed, basically. It completely removes the downside of arguably the best part of the crossbow, the reason why you would use the Last Lament over any other crossbow. Another item that we're using to sort of synergize well with that same Lich node is the Black Doubt, which is a low-level unique body armor, and we're only using it for the line, damage over time bypasses your energy shield. It doesn't give a lot of energy shield itself. It's not a great defensive item, but that line, I wanted to see how effective it was. And basically, because combined with this node here, 10% of damage taken bypasses energy shield, plus 5% on the tree, plus damage over time bypasses your energy shield, basically means that you're taking 15% less damage from all sources, and you're completely immune to all damage over time. And that doesn't matter if it's ailment, say like poison, bleed, whatever, ignite, you're completely immune to it. It can be applied to you, but it doesn't deal any damage because your life can't change, and it doesn't touch your energy shield at all. And also that works for other chaos damage over time, debuffs, physical damage over time, debuffs, corrupted blood, things like that. You're completely immune to all of them. The only other unique item we're using is Idle Hands. This is another low level unique. I'm literally just using it for 25% increased attack speed while on full mana, and it also has a line, you count as on full mana while at 90% of maximum or above. You're not using a lot of skills that cost mana. Crossbow skills only consume mana when you reload, and you never reload, so you basically don't use mana for that. You only use mana for Ripwire Ballista and Compose Requiem whenever you use that. So you always get this 25% increased attack speed. The rest of the mods don't really matter. Again, if you wanted to, which is probably arguably the better idea, what I would do is, if I didn't want to use the Black Doubt, I would go for a hybrid evasion energy shield body armor with good stats, obviously. And then take Spectral Ward per +1 to maximum energy shield per 12 evasion rating on equipped body armor. And then I would use Essential Sanguis with a fizz skill like Fragmentation Rounds, and then you would be able to make use of the leech, the life leech on the crossbow itself, give yourself some really good energy shield sustain, basically. But I'm not doing that. So just because I wanted to try and use this body armor. And the reason why you can't use Essential Sanguis with Siege Cascade is because it converts 80% of your physical damage to fire damage, and only leeching for 20% of the damage you deal. Sorry, only leeching 9% of 20% of the damage that you deal. It's not noticeable at all. It basically doesn't make your energy shield move at all. So for other items, it's basically just some damage to attacks, accuracy rating, some resistances and stats, and some damage to attacks, resistances and stats. The belt is literally just resistances and a bit of flask life recovery rate, which helps your life flasks even if they're converted to with Eternal Youth to apply to your energy shield instead. For base, I would probably go for, I think it's the utility belt base. Whichever one gives you 20% of flask recovery is instant. I would go with that base. On top of the mod to give you the life flask mod to give recovery applied instantly. It kind of just helps with a bit of an oh shit button. You can just spam fuck out your flask, and because your life never fills, your flasks, I believe, from sort of from playing the build, it seems like the flask kind of overflows. So long as you're still able to recover life from the flask, because your life doesn't move, you keep regenerating energy shield, or recovering energy shield from the flask. I think. You're wrong on that. Boots are just a pair of decent ES boots with some good movement speed and some cold res. And then this is probably one of the more important pieces, I guess, is a high energy shield helmet with some res, so that you can use Subterfuge Mask, which is +2 to evasion rating per 1 energy shield on equipped helmet. So this combined with Spectral Ward with a hybrid body armor and then some ES Leech would probably make you way tankier, if you don't care about using the blacked out with the damage over time bypasses your energy shield shit. That's the gear. It's just ES resists stats and then a couple of uniques, these two with some kind of interaction, and then this just for attack speed basically. A quick run through of the tree is using Lich on a the Witch Ascendancy, or rather the Lich Ascendancy on the Witch, using Soulless Form for damage taken bypasses energy shield and regenerate mana equal to 6% of your maximum life per second. My life pool is basically double my mana pool, so this is just net positive mana regen. Eternal Life, or your life cannot change while you have energy shield. I'm using Necromantic Conduit for Unholy Might. There's not really many good damage options for this build because it's not spell based. Like, you have Eldritch Empowerment, which is non-channeling spells, and then non-channeling spells into a power charge deal more damage. You can't really benefit from that on this. So I'm using Necromantic Conduit, which also has the downside of lose 5% of your maximum mana per second, which combined with this should fuck your mana, but it actually is completely unnoticeable. I don't know exactly why. Well, basically, I do know why. It's because you're getting a lot of flat regen from this, plus some scaling through mana regen on the tree and clarity as well. So you'll see that you've got 158 mana regen per second. So thankfully, this one node with a little bit of increased mana regeneration completely counteracts the loss of 15% of your mana per second, thankfully. And then I'm using Crystalline Phylactery. This is just because, again, there isn't really much good nodes. You could go for Rupture the Soul if you want to self-cast a curse. I don't, I'm too lazy to do that. I try to make these builds have as little button presses as possible. Crystalline Phylactery basically gives you a Jewel Socket that has 100% increased effect, but also has 50% more mana custom skills if you have no energy shield. Which you always have energy shield, it's no downside. In this, I just have a maximum energy shield jewel with some increased area of effect and additional stun threshold equal to 10% of maximum energy shield, which becomes 20%. This is probably, I guess, yeah, max energy shield is probably one of the best uses for this, at least for this build specifically. For the tree, it's just some ES, some more ES, some more ES here, more ES from the helmet, bit of ailment and stun threshold, ES plus 5% of damage taken bypasses energy shield. This combined with the Ascendancy node gives you 15% less damage taken basically. ES and maximum element resistances, Fire Pen, Fire Exposure effect, which we get from using the Fire Exposure support gem with Incinerate. Volcanic Skin for a bit of extra damages, extra fire, and some fire res. Then Ingenuity for Intelligence and Patient Barrier for ES. Intelligence is kind of important because the higher tier bases for Energy Shield will have higher int requirements, so you kind of need to get as much int where you can, kind of thing. Pathing down here, we grab Finesse for some accuracy rating. Killer Instinct gives you 50% of increased, 50% increased attack damage while on no life, which synergizes with the support gem we're using, and we can stay on low life because if you, the way that I do it is use Mask of the Stitch Demon to remove your energy shield, which allows your energy shield to, allows your life to recover. So then you switch back to your helmet, and then get yourself to low life, use your flask, it'll lock your life at the at the low life threshold, below 35% of your max, and then that will never change unless you die. So it doesn't matter if you use a well, if you use a checkpoint, if you waypoint into a new map, or go waypoint to trade, it will never recover itself unless you die, in which case you'll have to do this again. So long as you can stop yourself from dying, you won't have to do this. So that's kind of how I'm making use of low life as well, because your life can't change, you can lock yourself at that. So we're using this for 50% increased attack damage for free. Again, we're using Eternal Youth for to let your life flask apply to your energy shield, because waiting for energy shield recharge sucks ass, and I didn't want to put any investment into that, so I figured fuck it, we'll do Eternal Youth. Pin and run, or pin and movement speed if you pinned an enemy recently. It doesn't really, you could probably just ignore these nodes completely and put them somewhere else. Subterfuge Mask, as I explained before, gives you evasion rating for energy shield in your helmet. Falcon Technique gives you a bit of attack speed, some dex and evasion rating and movement speed. Increased elemental damage with attacks and some 5% physical damage mitigation, basically. These nodes give you damage against enemies within 2 meters. These nodes give damage against enemies further than 6 meters. There's not a lot of like easy to reach damage nodes for crossbows from the Witch starting area, so this is kind of where I went for that. There's probably some better options. And I've got a couple of jewel sockets that are empty. I would probably just put ES, AoE, whatever jewels, whatever kind of fits your requirements for the gear that you end up with. And then I have Acceleration Anointed for movement speed and skill speed, because I couldn't think of anything else that I really cared that wasn't like super expensive. What's left to run through the skills, I guess. So we use Siege Cascade. Siege Cascade basically is a crossbow skill that loads 1 round. So normally without this crossbow on, you would have to shoot your 1 shot, reload the crossbow, and then go on like that. Whereas this allows you to just hold down the button and shoot for free without ever having to reload your crossbow. And one thing I will point out as well is if you want to use more than 1 skill, so long as you see that this is loaded. If I load in fragmentation rounds, you'll see how slow the reload is. But now that that's loaded, switching bolts doesn't have the same penalty as actually loading. So if you want to use multiple different rounds, you can absolutely do that. I just try to sort of have as few buttons as possible. We'll start with Siege Cascade. This shoots on top of an enemy, it targets them directly, and then calls down kind of a payload with a delayed explosion at the end of it. As I said before, without projectile speed, this kind of shit at hitting enemies if they move reasonably fast, because it'll target where they were, and then if they move before it hits, then the explosion may just piss them completely. I'm using Martial Tempo, Fire Infusion, Primal Armament, Close Combat, just because shit's always in your face, and then Acceleration for more projectile speed. You could probably switch this for something else, or just not bother with Siege Cascade at all if you don't like the skill. It also has the the line 200% more damage against immobilized enemies. This goes up to 280% more damage against immobilized enemies. Immobilized would be anything that is frozen, pinned, heavy stunned, or electrocuted. So if you wanted to, you could probably convert your fire damage to cold damage using Blue Flame Bracers. That would give you freeze if you want to give that a try as an alternative to pin. You could also use Valakos Vice to convert it to lightning, and then use the support gem that makes lightning skills electrocute instead of shock. I don't have this quality I'm too lazy to do it. But yeah, so basically to synergize with that, we're using Rip-Wired Ballista, which is a ballista that fires pinning bolts. I'm using Overabundance for +1 to limit. Lockdown for more pin build-up against enemies within 2 meters. This is 2 meters of the totem itself, not of you, the player. So you basically just have to slap this down at an enemy's feet, and then it'll get the up to 120% more pin build-up. I'm using Greatwood. I don't know if this is better than having 2 separate totems, but without any investment into the totem life or totem defenses, it's pretty shit and they get squished pretty quick. This basically just gives it 5% more area of effect, 10% more totem damage, and 10% more totem life per limit. To my understanding, using Overabundance, this would give you +2 to limit, or this would give you 2 limit, so this would be 20% more totem life and damage, and 10% more area effect. Then we're also using Ancestral Urgency for totem placement speed, and Inspiration for reduced cost. I am using Incinerate with the Fire Exposure support gem. You basically just tap it, and if they get ignited, then they get exposed for 8 seconds. You could probably just ignore this and go for a Flammability Curse, if you want to do that. I kind of almost never use this. I probably should use it more, considering it's there. And then we have Wind Dancer, which is 10% more evasion rating per stage. 3 stages gives you 30% more evasion rating. We're using Dire Strike, which is another 50% increased attack damage while on low life. So that's 100% increased attack damage while on low life from the tree and from Dire Strike. Herbalism gives you more life recovery from your flasks, which still works when it's converted to ES recovery. Precision for accuracy and clarity for mana regeneration. This combined with the mana regeneration node on Lich will give you more than enough mana, as you can see, to sustain the 15% mana loss per second. You regenerate mana perfectly fine. You'll always be above the 90% threshold for idle hands if you decide to go through it. And then the last skill to explain is Requiem, which comes from the crossbow itself. You passively generate Anguish at 3.33 Anguish per second. You require 100 to use, and Requiem itself lasts for 12 seconds. You'll see it'll go up from 0% to 100%, and then it'll be able to use. It'll be usable, should I say. On this, I have Scattershot, Concentrate Effect, Cold Penetration, and Mobility. So Requiem, the way it targets is it fires projectiles at the ground, not at enemies. And like I said, this does have a bug where if I use my life flask, it just cancels it. I don't know why. But basically, it's a skill that has pretty high attack damage multiplier, pretty high attack speed multiplier. It converts 60% of your physical damage to cold, and then it has a impact radius of 1.6 meters and an anguish impact, so a 2.4 meter radius. Now, I'm using Concentrated Effect because when you reduce the area of effect, it makes the individual explosions smaller, but it also makes them cluster closer together. So for bigger targets, you'll get much better AoE, much better single target damage than if you were to use something to increase the AoE, which would basically spread out the explosions. And then again, Cold Pen and Mobility is literally just to move faster while using it. And that's kind of the build. I hope that it seems interesting. There's probably a lot more that you can do with it. I haven't died once since I switched over to this. I have gained 7 levels or so. I would probably, if you follow this tree exactly, any points after what I've currently shown you, I would probably go into Explosive Impact or Intense Flames. Kind of take this cluster where you can. If you go with the Siege Cascade setup. I do want to maybe do a build with the Whispering Ice Staff that was also added in the same patch, but I don't know if or when that will happen. With the 3.26 League coming on Thursday, I believe, I'll probably be focusing on that for a while. I'll maybe do some build videos for that if I come up with some interesting stuff. My League starter idea is going to be a champion aura bot to see how far you can take the Merc as a kind of a DPS minion in a way. The idea is to use on my character to use Tripanon for 100% increased, 100% base crit with Destructive Link, which gives your linked target a their main hand crit is equal to yours, and then also use the staff from Sanctum that drops from Lycia called Winds of Fate, which caps your crit chance at 50%, but makes it so that you makes it so that non-crits deal no damage, but it has 150% crit multi and it has pretty high fizz DPS. So using the Destructive Link with Tripanon overrides the 50% crit cap, so it should, in theory, work pretty well, but we'll see. That's my idea, and yeah, maybe you'll see some Path of Exile 1 videos for a little while. Hopefully the build seems interesting. Hopefully this was an okay showcase of it as well. And I shall speak to you later.